Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Healthy Entrepreneur Show. I am your host, Maxine Blagrove, and I'm so excited tonight. I'm so excited. I've got a wonderful guest. Her name is Kerry Sutra. And Kerry, we're going to talk about a topic tonight that is going to be enlightening for some, uh, shocking for some, and maybe just neutral, right? But I want to welcome our guest to the Healthy Entrepreneur Show. It's brought to you by Business Takeout, and Business Takeout is a platform that recognizes Black wealth through business education. In this show, I cover a ton of topics dealing with our own health and our well-being. And if you would like to follow or watch any other podcast from the Business Takeout platform, please follow them on all the social platforms, Business Takeout. And this show is airing live on many channels. There's YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course, Facebook. So I just want to introduce my guest, Kerry Sutra. Kerry I'm going to read, you are an intimacy and relationship coach.
Yes.
You are passionate about sex, the the introduction of sex and bringing it into the foyer of Black people, Black women and men, of course, and you are passionate about revolutionary. I'm sorry. I mean, I love what you stand for, and I'm reading it because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just can't wait to talk about. So I'm just like trying to like put it together, but I'm gonna do this.
Love it.
You're revolutionized by the idea of how we claim this in our society, how we claim our sexual being and the stigma around it. And whether you are single, married, gay, straight, whatever your sexual orientation or situation is, it's you are wanting to bring this out into the forefront and help to liberate people and change that stigma around it. Because I think it's so important for our mental well-being and just our existence. So without further ado, we're going to dive into it. So if you can introduce our audience to who you are, and we'll get started.
I can't even tell you enough how excited I am to be here. Maxine, thank you. Thank you, Business Takeout, for having me on this platform, giving me a forum and a voice to talk about something that I think is so pivotal in the way that we exist. Sexuality is one of our most primal, most basic, and most exquisite experiences that we have when we are in this human experience. And my passion is really about revolutionizing the way that we stand in our sexuality and the way that we have had these pictures, these ideas, and taking a moment to reframe them, to offer ourselves a new way, or not even necessarily a new way, but a way that allows all of us to stand free and in the wonderful realm of what sex and being interconnected through sexuality can bring into our worlds. So that's what I'm really about.
And I have to apologize because I totally botched up your whole your intro and your bio, because I think what you just said is what a lot of people are either hiding behind and not even knowing what to do or how to come out of this bondage, or just not really knowing how to navigate it because of the judgment and the negative comments that would come even from the people around them, right? So I really, like I said, I think what you're doing is amazing, and I want to learn some more. I'm going to be asking you a ton of questions, and we're going to just flow with this. Just before, when we first had our conversation, we were talking about when somebody is in a relation, when somebody has ended a relationship, and whether you're a man or woman, most often some women will choose to go, and I like the term that you use, on a hoe stroll.
On a hoe stroll, absolutely.
and guys would go on a conquer ship.
Right.
Right. We're using good terms. We're using,
right,
terms that are decent.
Terms we can use on TV.
On TV. And and you said something about there's nothing wrong with that because it could be a source of healing.
Absolutely. You know,
Yeah,
when we start to stand in what, like, I actually think I want to backtrack a little bit because I think
absolutely.
it's important to touch upon when how we exist in the space of understanding sexuality. And in our society today, especially in North America, we have been set up with conditioning that actually is very tied into the societal norms, or what we have considered norms of today. And those colonial um, norms, or these ideas or programming, actually have shaped how we stand up in the capitalist system, how women
Mm,
have stood up in their space and understanding, and the roles that we have played in the space of designing society, of our bodies becoming commodities in this space. And that ties very much into how we have stood up in relationships, and
right.
how that reflects in our marriages and the ways that we relate to each other in those spaces. So as we are evolving, and I think what we're seeing in marriages right now, or
Hmm.
long-term relationships, are actually no, I don't want to say failing, but they're finding that long-term relationships are not lasting longer. About 50-50 split, actually, of
Right.
long-term relationships within the first 5 years to which they are in existence. That is speaking to
Absolutely.
a shift in the way that we are in the experiences of that space. And I'm mentioning that because when we're talking about, the idea of the host role for women or conquership for men, after you've gone through a breakup, I think we're in a space of exploration and
Right.
redefining what is defining relationships. And as
Yes. Yes.
women
Yes.
in particular are starting to edge out the economic gap. So we no
Hmm.
longer are looking for relationships where, we need our partners per se to support us, or financially offer us that space. We are building those securities in for ourselves. And with that
Absolutely.
becoming a truth, it's switching how and what our needs are, and dare I say, our desires. As women,
Absolutely.
right? As women, it's getting much easier to be able to just step out and to say, hey, I just may want to get a little touched tonight, versus
Hmm.
needing to be in the confinement of a relationship to get that touch. And I
Right.
think those are conversations that I believe we need to be having in this idea and the realm of sitting in our relationships today. Yeah.
I completely agree with that
Mhm.
because I think that for some women who may be have reservations about doing that, it could be childhood trauma. It
Mhm.
could be from just their own insecurities, or maybe the need to feel a little bit more safer,
Mhm.
right? So I think, like, I mean, you made a good point about with women when they come out of a relationship, or and even if they're seeking one, we're more independent,
Mhm.
and we're not looking for that necessarily for that man to support us. We're looking for someone to be to basically just support us in a different way,
Yes.
right? In a
I
different way. It's not necessarily to support me to give me a place to live. It's more like let's just live our lives and be who we want to be and be liberated. So yeah, I was just dissecting all that you were saying, and I'm like, I get it, I get
yeah.
it. And I was in a clubhouse conversation just recently, and we were talking about that. We're talking about why is it that, or is it that when a woman or leaves a relationship, or the relationship ends, and they're going through the healing process, and they decide, you know what, I'm not sure that if I want to get into a relationship right away, I'm going to explore, right? And it means, if it means you'll be having multiple partners, or as you say, going on, what's that,
The host role.
host role, or even swiping left,
Yep.
Tinder,
Yep.
right, for hookups,
Yep.
right? um that's a decision that is like, it's tough, right? Because you are afraid of being judged, especially when you meet your mate.
Yeah.
So, like, what are you finding with being a coach with women who are coming out of coming out of this situation and going in with either trepidation or apprehension, or just saying, you know what, I'm going in, I'm going to do this.
See, I love all that you're saying, because this is very much a space of our truth and where we are sitting as we're moving forward. And what I offer out is that we are normally, if you come to me and you know, we're starting to try to tie the tendrils together from a breakup, I actually offer out that it's almost imperative to spend some time to do that exploration. And it's about breaking the programming that has originally been set in play for us as women. Absolutely. And how we've been told to show up, right?
Yes.
In all honesty, I normally start with my women with a self-pleasure process. Yes. Many of us have been taught from, you know, just the whole process of even just coming up. We are taught that our bodies are not for us, but they actually are for the pleasure of somebody else, for our partners. And I think that ties in very closely when you are mentioning how, you know, the idea of us having multiple partners and then taking that opportunity to come back later on and say to our partners, our body counts are, you know, X, Y, and Z, that can pose a problem. That plays into this idea that we as women our autonomy is not for us. Our bodies, our pleasure is not for us. And I'd like to systematically break that down. And how I believe we start is that reclamation of our bodies through a self-pleasure program. And when you are then empowered to know what your body likes, what you don't like, what that sensation for yourself of pleasure can be elevated to, what will happen is that when you do decide to go out there and explore, you're in complete power to understand what it is that you desire, how you're going to connect in those ways, and offer yourself out there in those space. And and in that, I find that you also then don't have, it becomes less about worrying about what the next person that may be a life partner is going to be in those expectations, because you are no longer judging yourself in those standards. And I find that has been even with my expression. So I offer that out there, that nowadays women can be in that space where they want to take the exploration, but with the understanding as well that really great sex happens when you can develop long-term, really safe intimacy containers. I like to call them couple bubbles, where you and your partner, that you can develop good sex. It happens when you have great communication and safety.
So are you saying that, so do you recommend that a woman go on a post-roll?
Absolutely.
I don't know the word. I keep having to look at my notes.
Absolutely, I do. I think.
But what if they don't want to?
If they don't want to, I see, this is the thing. You know, there is no right or wrong in this space. Right. What I love to offer out is that anything that feels and resonates with you is where you must begin, right? And with that understanding, you can create what is going to be in that space for you. It might be when we are younger. You know, we had a conversation where I was talking to you about being a very young child. I think it was with you, Maxine. Yes. I was talking about being a very young child and recognizing sexual pleasure from the age of 3 years old. And absolutely. Right. And I knew that it, like, I used to have a cushion. This is the story I was telling Maxine. I used to have this cushion that I used to actually sniff. Like, I used to suck my tongue and I used to sniff this cushion, but I actually found out that when I put this cushion between my legs and rubbed up against it, it made me feel really good.
It brought you pleasure.
Right. It brought me pleasure. And that's a very innocent thing. There was nothing wrong with that exploration. And in fact, when you approach sex from a childhood or a curiosity, it allows you to open yourself up to the experience of the pleasure. But when I was a child, I was really gifted where my mother and father did not shame me in that space. They actually just simply gave me some parameters around, you know what? We know it feels good to you, but it's kind of something you do in private. May not be something you want to do on the couch, you know? And so I understood that that was something that was for, of, and about me. And it started and created an opening for me to understand that my pleasure is mine and I can explore that. And when you hit your teenage years, Maxine, that's also something that you open up to. You know, the hormones start, you start to flower into that space of wanting to explore. And what happens is our society puts limitations on what a good girl, and I'm saying that in quotations, and what a young man's expectations are supposed to be.
Right,
and
right.
It's those parameters that where we start the confusion. But sex is such a natural and normal part of our beings. I believe that it is the one space to which you interconnect divinely with whatever you call, the supremeness of being. It is a space where you sit in the deepest part of oneness with yourself. And if that is the greatness of it, how can it be something
That's so bad?
That is so bad. And it's working through those layers so that we can unpack why we sit there. Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. I'm gonna throw the men into this now, because if a woman decides to do this and it's her right, it's her body, she can do whatever she wants. And if a man does it, it's okay, because they're meant to be hunters, and or I shouldn't say they're meant to be hunters, but they're more than likely are going to be seeking out there to conquer, right? How does it play a role in terms of how men will view women like that?
I'm in a space right now, and I love the languaging to which you speak about, because I think it highlights how we have created and really exist in this patriarchal system.
Yes,
and what I believe it now is to take a moment to push back a little bit against these ideas that a man is a hunter and it is their divine right to be able to go out and go on that conquest.
Exactly.
I love
that.
Right? It's time to do some pushback, because what we have actually done in the space of offering men that wide berth is, one, it's caused confinement on both sides. Mm-hmm. Women are in the conflict of having to be a good girl and not claim
and protect their virtue,
right,
and not let anyone come in and take advantage, or take advantage of their vulnerability.
And at the same space, what it actually has done is caused a lot of disconnect for men in particular, because we, from a very young age, 6 months of age and onwards, start to tell men that they're not allowed to be in touch with their emotional sense, with their feelings in any shape, form, and how. And what that does is it causes them to not really be able to be deeply in their own pleasure to some degree. It is an incredible space when a man can make real connection and really vibe in. It actually would enhance their own sexual experience and open them up to a truth when they're sitting with women. A woman's body cannot be stretched out, like some of the fallacies that we've created. Even the idea of virginity is a myth. The idea of the hymen is a construct. that has been created, or the idea of virginity is a construct that has been
Really?
created, really, and I can go in a little bit deeper.
I think I can understand that, but go on. I
The idea of virginity is actually a construct that has been created, and we don't often think about how women were set up, or even the roles of men and women have been set up in um, in the capital and colonial system to which we exist. The way that we
Okay.
have been able to form the relationships, or the interrelationships between men and women, actually fuel the economy, have actually fueled families. The traditional marriage is the first base for taxation. You know, middle class is formed by a husband and a wife. And without the middle class ceiling, without that middle class base, the capital system cannot exist in that way. So there's a lot of layers, once again, to why we have held men in those positionings and accepted these roles. And I think as we have these kinds of conversations, as we bring in to and front and center that these aren't necessarily truths, but just
Right.
that they just have existed, but we start to question why they exist, we will start to create much more authentic relationships for men
Right.
and women both to be we're in. I work with a lot of men who I can create a space for them for the first time in years that they can break down and cry.
Right. Right.
And that is it's a profound experience to watch and understand how disconnected a lot of our men feel from being with
Wow.
themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. That's so powerful. And as you're speaking, I want to ask you, what what made you get into this? What was your turning point, and how has it impacted your life?
For me, there have been several. There have been several major pivotal moments in my reality. One being that story of being 3 years old, recognizing my pleasure. I realized from a very early age that pleasure was powerful. I grew up as a young woman, feeling into that space and knowing and loving that. And as a teenager, I experimented, was very sexual, very open in my sexuality, and I got pregnant. The consequences of being in that space was I got pregnant at 17 years old. And it was an interesting contrast for me when I got pregnant, because as I mentioned before, my parents were wonderful, in allowing me my expression, but it switched very
Mm,
drastically once
absolutely.
I moved into that space where the consequences of my actions
Yes.
showed up front and center. And it was the first time for me where I felt like I had to contain it. I mean, there's a lot that comes around
For
being a
sure.
young mother, and stepping into that role. And there's spaces where motherhood creates, that shrinking of our truth as sexual beings.
Right.
And so I was afforded that, but I really had to calm myself down. It was a change in the way that I was a being. And then as I stepped into the role of mother, being with my partner, my children's father at the time, I really realized that I was rolling in the space, but it wasn't quite what I really felt whole with. And as I
Right.
went further along and started my education, went to university, I needed to pay for that. And I also had two very young children. So for me, I actually took a job in the adult industry. I became a dancer, as an exotic dancer, as well as an escort. And I worked in the industry for a few years, where for me, that experience was actually a really good experience.
Right.
And that also gave me a very different perspective
I
on,
can see.
right, on sex and
Yeah.
sexuality and my power in that
Hmm.
space. Uh,
You know what? That's a pretty. like I know your story,
Yes.
and thank you for sharing that. And I could see where it could liberate you because
Mhm.
in that industry,
Mhm.
maybe sex was viewed as an exchange. It's a business,
Uh,
and
Totally. Yes.
right,
And a service.
and a
There are
service.
many men or just people in general that for some, I used to have some clients who were paraplegic and may not have been able to access that intimate part of themselves that we all crave without it of being more of an exchange, right?
Right,
There
right,
were many people that were just maybe busy, couldn't be just couldn't find the time to make those connections, but yet still
right.
had needs that were in space. And many times, I know this is totally a cliche, it wasn't even sometimes about the sex. It would
Exactly.
sometimes just be about making those human connections and creating, just communities with people who needed as that exchange to happen. So yeah, there were many different facets to the space of working in the industry.
Well, I mean, I can see why even being a paraplegic or even all the other people who come into your space would would need that because we are all sexual beings, and no matter how we try to restrict ourselves or stay in the confines of what society tells us, like if you're a married woman, you're not supposed to even desire another man, or you shouldn't anyway openly. Same goes for a man, and also even if you're a single woman, you shouldn't be sleeping around with a bunch of men because then you're considered a, a hoe.
Mm-hmm.
And same with a guy being a player if he sleeps with a lot of women. So you said something about why do we have restrictions and conflicting ideas of how we are to be in society. I want to talk about that because these days, as you say, women and men relationships are not the same anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Women have different wants and needs, and men have different wants and needs, and there's certain standards that people are even like saying, you know what, I don't want to be your rescuer. You got after you've been with all these men. I don't want to be scraping the bottom of the pot. And women are saying, well, I don't want to be with somebody who's just been around everywhere, and you know, and I'm just going to be another check mark, right? So there's how do we break that
Mm-hmm.
um, those barriers and those thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I love this, and I am truly a believer in starting to have the dialogues. I offer like open forums where we put men and women in a room together, and we start to break down and have some candid conversations about what is really behind these thought processes.
Mm,
What are we tying into this idea of purity and chasteness? What are we tying behind the idea of male conquering? What are all of those spaces
absolutely.
really tying us to? What is that truly about? And how do we create satisfying relationships for us to be in? And what does that look like for us? And you see,
Exactly.
you mentioned something that is so real, this idea of us the evolution of how relationships are sitting. And as the playing fields are evening out financially, what we are finding that it is no longer enough. A couple or people who are really wanting to be in a relationship with each other have got to be ready to support the wholeness of who they want to be, who they
Mm,
are. You are now coming to the table equipped. And so is the person, hopefully, you are with. You are coming to the table equipped. And so, with that, the questions have to become, what can I do to support you to be in the fullness of yourself? Because I know that if
mm,
you are supported in your wholeness, our
right.
relationship can flourish as almost like a separate entity. outside of the two of us. So when I do couples counseling or working with couples, that is a lot of the work that we do. I work on bolstering each person that is involved in that space and creating an opening for them to create a safe container for them to hold their relationship in outside of that. And it sometimes looks like, really breaking down some of the things that we think are obvious, like this idea that we know how to love somebody is crazy to me. It takes the conversations. We have got to be ready to ask. It may be that my partner needs me. Like, take for example, I've been with my partner for 17 years. He needs me to say to him every day, your abs look amazing. He needs me to do that, because for him,
part of his love language.
Right. A part of his love language is for me to acknowledge that he works out, and this is something he does for me. He does that because he wants me to be attracted to him. So I have to reciprocate that by making sure that I acknowledge him sometime over the day, that his abs look amazing.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I think that, when you have a partner and if they need that for that support or that to feel good, then why not, right?
Yes. It's a simple thing that I can offer, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes we're not very clear. We just assume our partners should know what we need. Like for me, I know I like for him to kiss me on my ear once a day and surprise me. I like to not know when you're going to do it. But for me, just him doing that little kiss on my ear, we could have been busy all day long. It allows me to feel that little titillation that he still finds me there. And we literally agreed upon it. That was something that, I sat down and said, what can I do? He asked me, what can I do to make you feel loved and supported? And it's a little, right? And it's a little thing. It's a little thing. And so it's those kinds of connections that we just kind of take for granted.
Absolutely.
But asking for what you want in a very palatable and tangible way that your partner can meet you in can go a long way to creating lasting bonds.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. It's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I've done a thing about love languages before, and it's just a fascinating thing because that actually could save a lot of relationships.
Oh, for sure.
You said that you're the queen of something. What are you the queen of?
I am the queen of sexy smooth.
So I want to know about that. I want to hear all about the queen of sexy smooth.
It actually was a title that has been given to me by my counterparts when I was in training to become a sexual coach. And what that was encapsulating the openness, the smoothness of being able to flow through the spaces of what it is to be sexual.
Sexy, smooth, flowing,
yeah,
and accepting.
Yes.
I see that in you. I see that in you.
Thank you. Like my relationship with my husband, we actually are in an open or what we call a monogamous relationship, which means that we have opened up the space before to allow in other partners and being polyamorous. And it's something, especially in the Black community, that I love to talk a lot about, because we all know about being in relationships where, there's more than one person involved in the relationship.
Absolutely.
There's a mistress, or people are out there cheating. And I often say that there's this understanding or this idea in traditional marriages that everybody's meant to be monogamous. And I like to push back against that idea as well. Not everybody, I believe, is meant to be monogamous. And those ideas are causing us real strife where if we could have some of those open and honest community, conversations,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't be in these
In
positioning,
these positions. You
right?
know, I'm going to add to your point. I remember one time there was a show I was watching, and it was a man and woman speaking, and they were talking about being in a relationship and getting hurt and the cheating. And I made a comment and I said, you know, I don't feel that humans are meant to be. We're not built to be monogamous. I think we choose to, and it's due to the institution of marriage as well as society and what we're supposed to do. And you made a good point where you say that because of that, it creates more a struggle in a relationship, and more and more, I find that a lot of couples are opening up the possibility of either giving a hall pass, let's say, or inviting another person into the relationship, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a sexual partner. It
Ah,
could, right? It could be anybody that just brings a spark to the person, or a companionship, or maybe something that your husband or wife can't do, so that person can fulfill that void. Um, and then there's polyamory, as you say. I mean, we can. I would love to talk about that, and
but
if it because that is very prevalent.
yes.
It's just not. We're it's like whoa, you know. And I mean, I think okay. I live in Ajax. I don't know. You live in Niagara Falls, right?
I'm in
But
the Falls region, but Ajax area is near and dear to my heart. All my family's out your way.
right. And even if it's not there, let's just take another part of town. If
Yep.
you saw you know, John and Susie and Cindy together and they're acting like a couple, we're gonna look and say, what's going on here?
Right? The idea of a throuple, right? There's
Triple.
a
Yes.
throuple is
Yes.
is a very prominent space nowadays, or a polycule, which is when you have like
Hmm.
nucleus or groups of people who are in relationships with each other. The idea of conscious dating and conscious polyamory, where you are everybody is on side. So it's
Hmm.
this beautiful space of everybody having to be open and honest. And those are the foundational pieces to any kind of relationship to what you want to exist in.
Hmm.
Communication is the foundations of those.
Right.
So when you mentioned, I just wanted to pick up a piece of what you mentioned there, the
Hmm.
idea of monogamy not necessarily being a foundational basis. And actually, there is some historical understanding for that. It looks like when researchers go back and you look at the agricultural age, that's when we started to build in um,
Yes.
these
Monogamy.
ideas
Yes.
of monogamy, because we started
Absolutely.
getting tied to the land,
To
and
the land,
we
and
need
building the generational on the family and keeping the
wealth.
family unit and wealth.
and
But
and women became commodities in that space, and so did the children. You needed people to till and work the land. So there's something to be said about that. But
hmm,
when we were more hunters and gatherers, and in those kinds of societies, one, many of those are matriarchal, and two, sex and the way that you stood in relationships was much more communal, and it can be
that's
traced historically back.
you know, I've never heard anyone bring up this point. Like you, I mean, when you think about it, you think of even the African tribes or
Mhm.
even other culture who have multiple wives, and when did our society say, "Oh no, that's a taboo," right?
Yep.
But I don't think that we're made up that way. I don't think the majority of society in the 21st century that we're in right now. I don't know if a certain generation, like our generation, let's say, would be open to that. And unless you're extremely open, but I think maybe the millennials will be, maybe, who knows, right? But I think it's because I think that opening up your relationship
Mhm.
to others or to one person, whatever, there's going to be some pushback, or there's going to be some jealousy, there's going to be some conflicts. So I think that takes a brave person. You have to be very strong.
And you mentioned something that is very powerful about that. is the idea of jealousy. You know, there's a lot of emotions in our society that we are told are socially unacceptable, and jealousy is one of them. And I often offer out that when the couples I work with who are thinking about this is not to push away the idea of jealousy, but to embrace it.
To embrace it.
Embrace it. It is very much a piece and factor of when you are going to do this and open up the space. And I think when you open it up and come into the experience knowing that you might feel it, it opens up dialogue for the people involved to discuss it and find ways of diffusing that. It's really
I'm snapping my fingers because for me personally, there was a time in my relationship where I said to myself, am I jealous?
Mm-hmm.
And why am I jealous? What am I afraid of? Because jealousy could stem from an insecurity, meaning you are afraid of losing that person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to continue to be jealous and show that fear, then you're not allowing yourself to live.
You get it.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted to live. I wanted to be free. So I thought jealousy was not going to be a part of my makeup, because whatever is happening around me is a part of life.
I celebrate that. I do.
It's a part, because you cannot control another human being.
And you're so right. And also, you see, when you can sit in that and dissect that idea of being jealous, you're right. It's normally based in fear. The underlying feeling or emotion is fear. And when you can really sit with that, what you also do is offer a space for your partner to be able to support you and reassure you in that fear, if that's what you're looking for. When you see, we stop at jealousy, but we don't take it to the next level as to what is holding it. And when we understand that it is based in that idea of fearful of losing them, or just even it can sometimes feel like you're not enough, that fear of not being enough for your partner, then it offers the space for your partner to now come in. And when I was talking about that safety, that couple bubble that you're forming, that's an opportunity for your partner to say, whoa, wait a minute, you are always enough. Yes, I understand, and I'm going to hold your jealousy. I understand that feeling, but recognize that I love you and that you are enough. And normally with that, you can switch the tables. Normally with that, you can hold each other in a way that opens up that space for you to be in the experience of it.
Wow. This is pretty powerful. I mean, we started talking about really like people going off and doing their own thing after a relationship without judgment, and women, that stereotype. And then we touched on sex in the way where you explored, and then we talked about monogamy and polyamory. And I think I'm trying to tie it in to say that it's probably time that we take sex up to a different level. So whether that be you as an individual say, you know what, I'm going to view it differently. I'm going to be more open. I'm going to be thinking of myself and what works for me, what's comfortable for me. And I'm going to stop judging others or my potential partner. Stop blocking myself from a pleasure that is just so wonderful and so necessary for us, and also to open the idea of having an open sexual life, a life that's got some openness to it. It's not constricted to like, well, it's just me and you and that's it. and even that space, I mean, I'm sure polyamory or partners is not for everybody. It's not.
No way.
But you're speaking something about the idea of how we view the activity, the physical contact. And that's what I like about what you're doing right now. It's just changing the paradigm. It's of how we view
Absolutely. I really believe I love to introduce these concepts because we can all reside in somewhere in those, right? And what my ultimate message is that you can be all of it or none of it, and that is
it.
so okay. You can be in the expression of your sexuality in the way that serves you in your
Right,
highest light. And
right.
when we are
Oh,
in
wow.
that,
Okay.
right? When you are in that space, it impacts you in such a powerful way, and you will
Absolutely.
see how it shows up in all the other facets of your life.
Interesting. This is pretty powerful. Thank you. This is great. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, we could go on and
We
on.
could.
I hope if anybody's watching, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask us any questions. Kerry, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Um, where can everyone reach you if they would like? Because I know you've got a lot of things happening. You've got a podcast.
I do.
Can you tell us about that podcast real quick before we go?
Yep. I do a podcast called Medicine for the Resistance. Medicine for the Resistance is more my political stuff, but it is all about, it's myself and my co-host Patty Crowick. We talk very often and all day, every day about what it is to be Black and Indigenous, and how we can offer up spaces of resistance and really thrive against the colonial system. That is one thing that I do. You can check out my YouTube channel, which is Kerry
Mm-hmm.
Sutra's TV. And on that platform, we get down and dirty. I talk all things sex and sexuality. You can also find me on Instagram under Kerry Creations. And that one normally is where you'll find out where I'm going to be, what I'm doing, and get some really juicy tidbits as well as to how you can show up in this space and really be in the experience of your sexuality.
I love it. So really be in the experience of your sexuality.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. I love how you're passionate about it and how you view it. And I'm gonna, of course, I started following you when I saw you, and I was like, okay, I love what this girl is doing. I'm gonna get some tips.
Hey, I'm all about the tips. Thank
Exactly.
you.
Okay, well, thank you so much again for being on the show. I learned a lot, and I'm hoping that the audience has learned a lot as well. And I appreciate you coming on. And with that, I want I want to thank the audience for watching. And please, if you do like the show, we encourage you to like and share. And for Kerry, you can reach her on Instagram at Kerry Sutra. That's your Instagram page.
My Instagram handle. Yes, it is.
So thank you everyone for tuning into tonight's episode, and have a good night and stay well.
I was going to
Bye.
say, Maxine, thank you for having
Sure.
me as well. I really enjoyed our time together. This was a fantastic talk.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Okay, have a good night. Bye bye.